I'm Jeff Krasno, and this is the Commune podcast. My guest today is my good friend, Dr. Sara Szal, Harvard-trained physician, researcher, and 4-time New York Times bestselling author. After undergoing her own health odyssey to address and reverse severe burnout and hormone imbalance, Sara has used lifestyle and precision-based medicine to help thousands of patients feel and perform at their best. Our conversation today is all about the mitochondria and hormones and how they interact to drive so many of our health outcomes. We also explore the specifics of hormonal changes for women as related to perimenopause and menopause, as well as specific tools to start optimizing your cellular health today. As always, you can find me at jeffkrasno.substack.com or email me at jeffk@onecommune.com. So let's dive in with Dr. Sara Szal.
Mitochondria are these transducers that you have inside the cells. They're fascinating. And they take the food that you eat, as an example, and they convert it into energy. They make ATP, which is what powers you. So that's why they're considered the powerhouses of the cell. It's like the power plant, the healthy power plant within your cells, most of your cells.
Yeah. And they look like little jelly beans.
They look like cute little jelly beans with a little carving inside.
They can make energy without oxygen, but they make more energy with oxygen. And that's
Yes.
kind of the big deal about them.
Let me say that I am not an expert at mitochondria. Part of what interests me the most in mitochondria is that I am hormone girl.
Yeah.
So I love hormones. I feel like they are these teeny tiny little molecules that have big effects. They're the small hinge that swings big doors.
That's good.
And what I've seen over my career, taking care of men and women with a lot of hormone issues, is that there's this link between your hormones and your mitochondria. What I'm especially interested in right now is how women at different life cycles start to have a problem with their mitochondria when estrogen is lower. Postpartum, perimenopause, menopause. And that's when women start to feel fatigued like never before. They try to do all this heavy weightlifting that we're pushing on people now, and they just can't. Like, they're exhausted after 15 minutes. They notice that their brain energy is not what it used to be. Their processing speed is slower. And a lot of this seems to map back to what's happening with the mitochondria and what's happening with their estrogen levels.
So if you're feeling tired or you have brain fog, there's a very, very good chance that your mitochondria are not optimized. They're not firing. They're not producing 34, 36 ATP. They're not being able to leverage glucose or free fatty acids for really making good energy. So what's the relationship there between, like, say, the reduction in the production of estradiol, or what's going on? Like, what's the relationship between hormones and the mitochondria?
Well, we're still trying to understand that. I mean, the place where I first started thinking about this is the work of Lisa Mosconi. And so Lisa is a neuroradiologist, as you know. She's at Cornell, and she started off, she's got this family history of Alzheimer's disease that is horrible. Like, so many women in her family have it. I've got a family history of Alzheimer's disease, so she and I are like fast friends in this particular arena. And she discovered that as she was looking at the female transition from premenopause in the 30s to perimenopause in the 40s and postmenopause in the 50s, that the female brain completely changes. And the first thing she discovered was that the female brain and its use of glucose, like its uptake of glucose, starts to falter as women make that transition from premenopause to perimenopause. And it's not like a minor little thing. It's like a 20 to 30% decrement in the way that the brain is taking up glucose. And this happens in 80% of women and no men. So 80% of women are going through this. The term for it is cerebral hypometabolism. So let's break that down because that's kind of a technical term. I think of it as slow brain energy. So the brain's ability to take up glucose is ilan related to mitochondria. So the mitochondria are not functioning the way that they did for women in their 30s. So that's how I first got interested in this. And then since then, she's kind of built out her body of work. And she's shown that this issue with glucose uptake is regulated primarily by estrogen. And the vehicle seems to be the mitochondria.
You know, Ben Bickman, you've probably run across him. I know when I was talking with him, he was doing autopsies of hippocampal tissue in people that died with Alzheimer's. And this is what he was finding, what you just said. Well, you know, he attributed to insulin resistance, but essentially that the brain stops making energy well.
Yes.
And that's obviously connected to the mitochondria. And there can be tons of glucose around, but the brain doesn't seem to be able to actually transmute that glucose into energy.
That's right.
And in the presence of a lot of glucose and hyperinsulinemia that goes a lot with that, you're not going to probably produce many ketones either. So your brain doesn't have that energy resource or substrate.
Right.
So it's starved.
Kind of their second choice for fuel.
So it's just starved. And I think, you know, I know Dale Bredesen as well. Like he, you know, I think there's many other confounding reasons why you can develop Alzheimer's, neuroinflammation being a big one. But it seems like, this combination between the cessation of the production of estradiol, insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction, and Alzheimer's, it seems like that is in one gumbo.
It is one gumbo. And this calls out a couple of things that I think are worth diving deeper into. One is a lot of people conceive of perimenopause. And I think of postpartum as a perimenopausal state because your hormones go from sky high down to nothing when you deliver your baby in placenta. They think of perimenopause and menopause as this event where the eggs stop producing estrogen and progesterone, and those are kind of the shining stars of perimenopause and menopause. The truth is, it's so much broader than that. There's so many systems that are changing.
Yeah.
So there's this massive metabolic and immune change that's happening in the female body. And the mitochondria are a big part of that. So with Ben Bickman and insulin resistance, that's a huge factor because as estrogen declines, women become more insulin resistant. And we develop more inflammation. We have more issues often with cortisol. And you also spoke about Dale Bredesen, and I think that's an important point. You know, one of the things I love about Dale as he talks about Alzheimer's disease is that he's got this great analogy, which is when you develop Alzheimer's disease, it's as if you have 36 holes in your roof.
Right.
So I love this concept. And you can't just patch 1 or 5 holes because when the rain comes, if you haven't patched every single hole, you're still going to get water damage and a flood. So I don't work with Alzheimer's patients. I work with people who are younger. I work with a lot of executives and people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And it's at that time that people have maybe 3 holes in the roof or 5 or 7. You and I have a few holes in our roof, let's be frank. And so that's when I think you can really make more of a difference. And one of those holes is mitochondrial dysfunction. One of those holes for women is loss of estrogen. And men need estrogen too. It's really important for your bones and for emotional regulation.
Yeah. I think John Kennedy said the best time to fix your roof is on a sunny day. Right.
That's for sure.
There have been a lot of different protocols that have been promulgated to upgrade mitochondrial function or stimulate mitobiogenesis, for example, the creation of new mitochondria. Are there any that you feel are particularly impactful and effective for people in general, and also for women in perimenopause and menopause?
Well, this is where I want to riff with you a little bit
Yeah,
because you and I do constant N of 1 experiments. And
yeah,
so this is a really rich topic. So when it comes to the mitochondria, I think it's interesting to look at genomic factors, which predict some risk of mitochondrial impairment. I like to do genomic testing together with biomarker testing to kind of measure where someone is with mitochondrial function. And then I like to do N of 1 experiments. But pretty much anytime I'm trying to help someone with mitochondrial fatigue, I'm going to start first with lifestyle. So maybe we could do a little back and forth for what your favorite thing is for mitochondrial support.
yeah. I think some degree of intelligent fasting.
Intelligent fasting, and by what do you mean?
Well, I think fasting is very bio-individual, and it's also different for men and women, and it's different for women and women,
Yes.
depending where they are in their life or where they are in their cycle. Um, and so that's why I mean intelligent. Like you have to apply it to where you are in your own life. For me, when I'm on that 16-8, pretty fundamentally, I tend to operate very, very well. And I think there seems to be some good data to suggest that a fasting protocol such as that one will help you generate good mitochondria and new mitochondria, and also to some degree keep mitochondria healthy through minimizing oxidative stress. So in the mitochondria, for example, I don't want to get too geeky, but just as a product of creating energy, you create free radicals. And so you need to give your body some degree of break from constant input to minimize free radical production. And so I think essentially some degree of self-imposed calorie scarcity helps you there. And then the body is also senses when it's a little bit nutrient deficient, and it adapts to that particular condition. And this is how the body is quite amazing to be engineered to always be in relationship with its environment. So if you have a little bit less caloric intake, your body still needs to keep itself warm. It still needs to move. It still needs to function, still needs to make energy. And in order to do that, it will essentially make more mitochondria in order to essentially provide you with those extra powerhouses. So for me,
It's a form of good stress.
it's a form of good stress. Absolutely. And, that was the way that we evolved for hundreds of thousands of years on the Serengeti. We had to deal with winter's paucity, and this not only kept us lean, but as we are finding out, it stimulated all of these other pathways and processes of autophagy and metabolic flexibility and our ability to burn fats and both glucose for energy.
It's another place where there's sex differences.
Yes.
So I always love to separate sex differences that are biologically determined versus gender differences that are more socially constructed.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the sex differences is that men tend to benefit from fasting much sooner than women do.
Mm-hmm.
So we know overall that men tend to start producing ketones after an overnight fast of somewhere around 12 to 14 hours, and women often need longer. They need more 14 to 16 hours to produce the same level of ketones.
Mm-hmm.
So intermittent fasting seems to benefit women when they go a little bit longer, but then you have to balance that with cortisol production because there's good stress and then there's not so good stress. And if you are a woman who's fasting for 16 hours every night and it's causing you to produce more cortisol, it may undo some of the benefit that you're getting.
Yeah,
So it's a little tricky.
I think so. What about you? What's a good protocol that you might throw into the ring?
So I would say eating in a way that supports glucose metabolism and helps you with metabolic flexibility is a really important form of taking care of your mitochondria. So not high carb, ultra processed foods that are stressing your mitochondria in a way that is hard for them to do their job. So this layers in the issue of glucose metabolism and that conversion of the food that you're eating, certain macronutrients, into fuel. And, here I can invoke um, a few decades of, my 20s when I was in my medical training and I was eating at hospital cafeterias where the food was horrendous. Like the healthiest thing I could find was a veggie burger. I was basically eating a standard American diet because the only time I could eat healthy was at home, and I wasn't home very much. So that was my 20s. And then in my 30s, I had a couple of kids. Unlike the amazing Skylar Grant, I gained like 70 pounds in my pregnancies.
Wow.
I had a lot of insulin resistance. Kind of the lid came off of my metabolic dysfunction, which happens for a lot of women because pregnancy is a stress test that some of us fail. Skylar passed it, of course, but I kind of failed it. And so when I was in my mid-30s between two kids, I started to do some of the basic tests that can give you a sense of how your mitochondria are functioning as well as your insulin. I looked at my fasting glucose and it was quite consistently 110, 115 milligrams per deciliter. I had a problem with glucose metabolism. So, I've learned over time, and you went through a similar process of figuring out, okay, I can modify my macronutrients. I can modify the way that I'm eating. I can get the protein that I need to support muscle synthesis. I can modulate my carbohydrates so that I have just enough to make serotonin and thyroid hormone and cycle regularly, but not so much that it's overburdening the systems of my body. So I think food is a really important part of taking care of your mitochondria.
What about cold therapy and resistance training? So the other good stressors that may have sexual differences too.
Yeah, I haven't done a deep dive on the evidence for deliberate cold exposure in women versus men. My sense is the data is better for men. It usually is. It's kind of a safe assumption. I know Stacey Sims has done some content related to this, but I haven't looked at the data myself. My personal experience with cold exposure is that I feel like I'm going to die. And the signal from your body when you're in, when I get in the Pacific Ocean and it's whatever, 55 degrees or 60, I feel like I'm going to die. And I feel that way. I was just at the amazing Commune retreat center this past weekend. And I get into the cedar tub and I can handle that.
That one's okay.
But the other one,
Oh, it's hard.
oh, it's so hard.
Yeah.
And all the messages, the signals on my body are like, get out of the tub.
Yeah.
So I feel like I get this cortisol response that may not make cold exposure as helpful in my body as it is in others. What's your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I don't love that recumbent plunge either. I mean, that's often set at 40 to 45 degrees. It's brutal.
It's brutal.
55 degrees, is okay for me. And cold is very subjective. It can actually confer benefit at almost any temperature, provided that it feels a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I just kind of think about what's happening when I get into something cold and my core body temperature plummets, and then I've got to essentially make heat from energy in my mitochondria to thermoregulate. So I've got to move my core body temperature back into that warm porridge of 98.6 about. And so my body and my mitochondria have to jump into action in order to do that. And I think that positive stress, in my mind, optimizes their function.
Yes.
And I can think of other things too. It's like long breath holds, for example. Like, what are you doing? Well, you're depriving yourself of a little oxygen. So you go into some mild degree of hypoxia and hypercapnia, so an abundance of carbon dioxide. And your body has an adaptive response to that. Because it knows that there's less oxygen around, it makes more red blood cells. And the red blood cells, of course, the hemoglobin in them are the couriers for oxygen to your mitochondria for the production of energy. So when you deprive yourself of a little bit of oxygen, when you put yourself in that little bit of stress, your body actually responds adaptively by making your mitochondria more optimized for creating energy. And this is why many Olympians train at high altitudes where the air is less dense and there's less partial pressure of oxygen. And the results, your body then adapts to that stress. Now, the dose is the poison always, right? Because, like you said, too cold, you're going to just have a crazy stress response and your body is going to just go into shock, basically. I mean, obviously, like hypothermia is no joke and hypoxia is no joke, but just the right amount seems to be the key. And
the Goldilocks, the Goldilocks dose.
Totally. That's it.
And I've seen anecdotally some patients, women who do really well with deliberate cold exposure. I have one woman in particular who had low testosterone, and this is totally anecdotal. I haven't seen any studies looking at hormone production in cold exposure. But this was a woman who had really low testosterone. And she started making more testosterone with regular cold exposure. So I have a lot of interesting questions and hypotheses about this, but it feels like there's a level of complexity in women that's a little more murky than it is in men.
Yeah. What about resistance training?
I love resistance therapy as a way of supporting mitochondria. It's a tricky thing because one of the early symptoms of mitochondrial fatigue is that you have post-exercise fatigue. And so you have to kind of find the starting place and then the progression that works for the individual. And that's where N-of-1 experiments, I think, can be so helpful. So I'm a fan of resistance training.
For me, it was very central in taming my prediabetes and managing blood sugar, because even at rest, muscle is a greedy little organ when it comes to glucose. So it's just a vacuum. And so it'll vacate serum glucose. And that's good because obviously too much glucose is going to lead to too much insulin. Any molecule in excess will eventually create a resistance to itself. And this is what was happening to me. I was insulin resistant. My mitochondria wasn't using glucose well, and because I had too much of it in my bloodstream. So, putting a little bulk on through resistance training really helped me manage that. If I could just reduce everything and not play tennis, which I love to do, and do other forms of exercise, if I just reduced it to the very simplest, it would be walk every day and lift heavy things. That's it. Yeah. And I think you'd be pretty well off. Yeah. But of course, that's how we evolved. We walked 7 to 10 miles a day, and we built structures and carried firewood and et cetera. Every once in a while, we'd raise our heart rate to 90% of max if we were chased by a tiger. So just that little combination, to me, makes sense because this is how I evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. So
it does make sense. So I'm going to layer in something I learned from one of my mentors, Mark Houston, who runs the Hypertension Institute in Nashville. And I did a 2-year advanced cardiometabolic fellowship with him. So he talks about for cardiometabolic fitness, the best combination is 2/3 resistance training with heavy weights and 1/3 cardio or aerobic activity. So these lifestyle things I think are so critical. There's a list of supplements that can help the mitochondria. We can talk about those. But I feel like you've got to dial in these lifestyle pieces first.
Yeah.
And then there's also these other therapies. I don't know if you have an opinion about red light therapy or
Yeah.
hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Yeah, I think red light therapy, infrared light or near infrared light, it's a long waveform, right? So it's all the way at this side of the electromagnetic wave spectrum. So we know these gamma waves on the other side, and then X-rays, and then UVC, UVB, UVA, which like this, and then there's visible blue light and visible light. And then as you kind of go along that electromagnetic wave spectrum, the frequency and the amplitude of the waves get longer. And you can think of it in analogy this way, is that if you've ever like driven down Sunset Boulevard and you pull up to like a tinted SUV and that's blaring hip hop and R&B, and all you hear is the boosh, right? All you can hear is the bass, right? Similar concept with sound waves is because the bass waves are long like this, and they can penetrate the steel of the car because there's such long waves, where the treble is like very high amplitude, high frequency, very similar to light waves. And so if you use that theory, because of the shape of these infrared waves, they penetrate your body and your skin, and they can go all the way up into like 8 to 10 centimeters inside of your body. So they go all the way into the intracellular level, and they interact with the mitochondria. It stimulates the production of antioxidants, of intracellular melatonin and glutathione. And so that is the mechanism by which infrared and red light therapy essentially minimizes oxidative stress, because it stimulates the production of these antioxidants at the subcellular level in the mitochondria. Pretty cool.
Okay. And is this also why saunas are helpful, like infrared saunas?
Yeah, same deal. Same technology. I mean, this is a difference, honestly, between dry saunas and infrared saunas, actually.
That infrared is more effective for the mitochondria?
Yes.
Interesting.
For that very reason.
Okay.
Because dry saunas is going to heat the air is going to heat your body. Infrared, you're actually heating the body with the electromagnetic wave. That radiation is what's heating the body. It's not the air itself.
But you're getting different benefits from a dry sauna.
Yeah.
And I love
sure.
your dry sauna.
I love the dry sauna. It's a much more pleasurable experience for me.
And there's more data on it, honestly.
There's way more data. I mean, all from Finland, because they haven't all converted to the infrared saunas yet. And
you think they will?
No, but the sweating benefit. I mean, you sweat more in the dry sauna.
Totally. Yeah. It's like
and it's probably
cardiovascular.
It's probably better. Yeah, it's like a low grade cardiovascular exercise. It's like a zone 2 or maybe just below zone 2.
Might be my favorite zone 2.
Yeah, it's a vasodilator for sure, and there's probably some deep detox aspect to it because you're really perspiring a lot. But I think the red light therapy. I mean, there's all these other things, production of collagen, et cetera.
So then there's a list of supplements, and I really feel like the supplements should only be considered when you've got these foundational elements in place. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Have you tried any supplements for your mitochondria?
Sure. The urolithin A. Yeah.
Mitopure.
So there's that. They are very, very steeped in clinical research.
Yes.
Years and years and years and years before they ever brought any product to market.
That's
so
right.
I tend to really trust them and the data. And as far as I understand, that compound urolithin A stimulates the process of mitophagy, basically the equivalent of autophagy for mitochondria. So essentially organelle death, you know. When mitochondria become dysfunctional and they start to produce way, way, way more ROS, you want them out of the way.
Reactive oxygen species.
Yeah. And so as far as what I understand is that the urolithin A does that. And I think some people, maybe 25% of people actually have the bacteria that will actually endogenously produce urolithin A, but most people don't.
Yeah, so I just dove deep on this particular question.
Mm-hmm.
And what we know is that 30 to 40% of us make urolithin A. We've got the right bacteria, we can make it. You can even test to see if you make it.
Mm.
But part of what's challenging is that as you get older, you make less of it, even if you're someone who does make it. And it's also more intermittent than you
Mhm.
might want or
Yeah.
need. The other issue is that this part this makes me think about how mitochondria are involved in so many different aspects of your health. So I was doing this deep dive on autoimmunity and mitochondrial function. And one of the things we know is that in some cells of the immune system, like your T cells, when the mitochondria are not working properly, it can lead to loss of tolerance and it can lead to autoimmunity and sort of this problem of differentiating what is your own tissues and what are foreign tissues. So mitochondria really reaches so far and wide in terms of some of the chronic diseases that we're facing. And then going back to women and this massive psychoimmunoneuroendocrine transformation, mitochondria has its fingers in all these different aspects of those systems that are changing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, urolithin A is one supplement, another is CoQ10,
Right.
N-acetylcysteine, quercetin, alpha-lipoic acid. And so you can do N of 1 experiments and see if these are helpful for you. They're the kind of things that I've taken and I haven't really noticed any difference when I take them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting part of the story, but I also feel like you've got to sequence it right. You've got to like get the lifestyle stuff. You can't like have a terrible lifestyle where you don't sleep, you're stressed all the time, you drink like a fish, and it's not non-alcoholic beer, and then you like throw in a little CoQ10 and hope
Right.
for the best. Like
Yeah.
that doesn't work.
That does not work. Got to major in the majors. There is a magical, quasi-mystical aspect of the mitochondria and how it co-evolved with chloroplasts. And I think this could be a good way to bookend the conversation, because obviously there's so much about mitochondria that's so germane to how we function and how we feel day to day. But to trace it back, 2 billion years to a really fortuitous tryst between, these single cellular organisms. So like an archaea tried to essentially engulf a bacterial cell. This is, in some soup in the ocean. And that tryst led to this double membraned mitochondria. It couldn't quite engulf it. And it led to this mitochondria. And at the same time, there was a symbiotic development with chloroplasts, very, very similar, where, a cyanobacteria and some other single-celled organism combined to create what we know as chloroplasts. And these things basically were totally endosymbiotic, because essentially chloroplasts then became the engine by which photosynthesis happens. So they're in leaves of plants, and they take electromagnetic radiation and they turn it into chemical radiation in combination with carbon dioxide and water. And then those are the autotrophs. And then they actually make a byproduct, which is oxygen, which is exactly what the mitochondria need. They need oxygen. And these things arose simultaneously. And then this creation of the mitochondria then, eventually jumped onto land and, created the possibility for complex life. And this kind of yin yang that seems to be a signature of the intelligence of nature, I find to be just quite amazing.
It is amazing. And I feel like it points out the difference between you've got this amazing liberal arts education from Columbia, and me, I have a Bachelor of Science in Engineering, And so the thing I think about is how our mitochondria come from our mothers.
Yes.
So I'm going to take it back a few less generations. And I think it's so interesting that you only inherit your mitochondria from your mother. So what happens when the sperm, which has all of the mitochondria mostly in its tail, meets the egg, which has a ton of mitochondria, is that you're losing when the sperm penetrates the egg, you basically are losing the tail. And so you don't get any mitochondria in the fertilized egg from the sperm. It's just from the woman. And so that, to me, sets up this super interesting idea of what was your mother's mitochondria like? What was your grandmother's and your great-grandmother's? Like, my mother never knew how to rest. I think she burned out her mitochondria probably in her 20s. And that's what I inherited. Like, I need some workarounds to deal with that.
Yeah.
And it's also, from an evolutionary perspective, it's so curious because the kind of evolutionary pressure that benefits women is then what gets passed on, not the evolutionary benefit that is in favor of men. It's lost in that matrilineal line. So the 37 plus genes that you get from mitochondrial DNA, all from your mom.
Yeah. It's fascinating. And it allows you to matrilinearly trace your ancestors all the way back to some mitochondrial Eve or Lucy figure, which is just fascinating. Yeah, I mean, it's unclear what role those mitochondrial genes play now. I don't know. But it is amazing to think that, within your cells, of which you have some 39 trillion or 40 trillion cells, 30 trillion cells, that you have your DNA kind of within the nucleus, but then there's this mitochondria that has its own genes, its own DNA.
Its own little ecosystem.
Only from your mom.
Yeah.
Wow.
I feel like we get to end with the mystery of mitochondria.
Yeah.
And our friend Casey Means talks about mitochondria as this transducer between the physical and the spiritual. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the spiritual insofar that it is representative of some deep foundational cosmic intelligence by which nature functions, that it is deeply, deeply creative. Now, I don't think you need a creator for creativity to exist. I think the second that you attribute creativity to a creator, you get into trouble. But if you look at what happens within the mitochondria that plays this role within this greater schema of nature, it essentially, if you think that chloroplasts essentially transmute electromagnetic radiation from the sun, right, from a fusion reaction between hydrogen nuclei 93 million miles away, right? And then what happens in the leaf of a plant, it essentially takes that electromagnetic radiations and turns it into chemical energy. And then we eat those plants, or we eat the animals that eat those plants. And what unlocks that chemical energy is our mitochondria, right? So that's the bridge from then chemical energy to mechanical energy or kinetic energy. It allows me to do all these things, have all these thoughts, have all my neurons fire, move my lips, connect with you, look into your eyes. Everything emerges from that spark. And then we pass that along because the byproducts of our mitochondria is exactly what the chloroplasts need. We produce in our mitochondria water and carbon dioxide. We breathe it back out, and we play this role in this mutual interdependence that sort of is the understory of what it is, of what life is. And so that's how if I were to attribute any sort of mystical component to the mitochondria, that's probably it.
Well done, Jeff Krasno. Jeff the Bridge Krasno. I so appreciate it. So we're
Yeah.
going to go eat some plants now?
Let's eat some plants. I'm hungry.
Awesome. Me
Thanks.
too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Check out Sara at Sara Szal, that's SZALMD.com. I also want to let you know about our Commune course platform that contains over 3,000 lessons and practices from the world's preeminent integrative medicine doctors, health experts, and fitness, yoga, and mindfulness teachers. It's a repository of recipes for holistic health. So check it out for free at onecommune.com/try commune. And for more of my weekly musings like today's episode on health and culture, ad-free episodes of this show, and live-streamed conversations, head over to my Substack at jeffkrasno.substack.com. As a reminder, the audio version of my new book, Good Stress. Yes, stress can be good in the right dosage. It's available on Audible, and you can also listen to it for free as part of your premium Spotify membership. If you prefer the old school analog option, you can purchase a dusty old scroll at goodstress.com and get a bunch of goodies thrown in, including $900 worth of courses with some of my biggest influences, including Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Zach Bush, and Dr. Gabor Mate. Of course, feel free to reach out to me directly with comments, questions, and criticism of the constructive variety at jeffk@onecommune.com. Okay, that's all from the Commune for today. My name is Jeff Krasno, and I'm here for you.